Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. "I have spoken openly to the world," Jesus replied. "I always taught in synagogues or at the temple, where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said." When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" he demanded. "If I said something wrong," Jesus replied, "testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, "You aren't one of his disciples too, are you?" He denied it, saying, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Again, Peter denied it. And at that moment, a rooster began to crow. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." And Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" And Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now, my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate.
One of the things that is so intriguing about this passage that Linda has just read for us is this theme of truth. The passage, or very near the passage, this is introduced. Jesus has been brought before the religious leaders, and they ask him to speak for himself, to answer the charges, and he questions why they've come in the middle of the night to take him away. And they respond very negatively to this. But he then says this really interesting thing. He says to them, "Look, are the things that I'm saying not true? Because if what I'm saying is true, then why have you got this problem with me?" And it's an odd element for him to introduce into the conversation at that point, this notion of truth. It comes up later at the end of this passage when Pilate is questioning him. And he's challenging him on this, are you the king of the Jews? Do you think of yourself as the king of the Jews? And of course, there's a hidden political agenda behind that for Pilate in his questioning. But what Jesus says is, "I came to bring the truth And then you have this very, very almost flippant line of Pilate's, where Pilate says, truth, what's truth? I think this is a really, really important passage. But I think truth as a concept is one that we've taken to neglecting a little bit. In the contemporary church, things are often framed in terms of you should have truth in your faith and you should have love. And you have to kind of balance off truth and love. And often more conservative Christians are charged with the idea that they have too much truth and not enough love, as if truth and love are somehow kind of opposites of each other, or it's a kind of a zero-sum game. And because we want to have love, truth as an idea in the church is kind of falling out of favor because it's become a term that's a little bit synonymous with sort of narrow-minded dogmatism. And it's a shame because when we neglect how much Christ's incarnation, how much his ministry, how much he is about truth and about the bringing of truth, I think we miss an enormous part of the story. John's gospel emphasizes this very much. It's from John's gospel that you get this well-known statement that you shall know the truth and that the truth shall set you free. It's from John's gospel that we get this, one of the most well-known verses in all of Scripture, where Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. I think sometimes as contemporary Christians, we get the idea of Jesus saying, I'm the way. And we get the idea of him saying, I'm the life. But we kind of miss that bit in the middle where he says, I am the truth. The other Gospels reflect this as well. If you pull up a concordance and look through, you'll see that all through his teaching, Jesus starts time and again when he speaks to his disciples, he starts by saying, I tell you the truth. And then he goes on to do so. It's a big, big theme in the Gospels. It's a big theme in who Jesus is. But it's one that I've wrestled with as I was preparing to share a few thoughts with you today. I thought, how do I get hold of this truth thing that is so clearly here in the text? And as God so often does, he provided the answer to me last night. Because, as you know, we do a prayer vigil here, the Kingsway congregation, on Maundy Thursday, where we set up a series of prayer sort of stations around the church, and people can come in and work their way through a kind of a devotional path of prayer. And this year, for the first time, I was very blessed because 11 of the men in the church agreed to join me, and we stayed last night, overnight, at a sleepover in Kingsway House. We brought sleeping bags and we slept on the floor of the basement so that between midnight and 6 a.m. We took turns coming over every half hour so the prayer vigil would run through the night. And as luck would have it, I drew the 3:30 a.m. slot. So at 3:30, I woke to my alarm next to my sleeping bag, and I came over, I have to confess, in my pajamas, and I did the prayer vigil. And the second station was here on the chancel steps in front of the cross, and it was a simple exercise. All that I was called on to do was to read Psalm 51 and to see in it my sin. And I was so struck by the nakedness of that. Sitting here at the foot of the cross, there wasn't any ambiguity at all about who Christ is. And there wasn't any ambiguity about who I am and what I am and what my strengths and weaknesses are and what my successes and what my failures and what my sins are. There was nothing but truth between me and the cross, because what was between me and the cross was Christ. And Christ said, I am the truth. Christ came to speak the truth. There are individual statements that he makes along the way which have truth in them, but it's not just that he speaks truths, it's that he is truth, because he is the truth about who God is. And in the presence of that truth, we cannot avoid the truth about who we are in relationship to him. So on this day of the year when we most pay attention to the cross, I encourage you to embrace not just Christ's love for us, not just Christ's sacrifice for us, not just the new life that Christ brings us, but rejoice that when you sit before the cross, there is nothing there between you and the cross but truth, because there between you and the cross is Christ.